things. Just to remind you, you have an exam on Thursday. Review sheets posted on Google Classroom. You can choose to do the review sheet, or you can do the reading guide. If you choose to do the review sheet, just like in the past, it's due the day of. If you choose to do the reading guide, it's due the night before on Google Classroom. So you guys can pick what you want to do. Today we're going to start our notes. If you were absent last week because of the pep rally, don't forget you need to come in and make up the test analysis. The 3 things that you have to turn in order to get your 30 points include the test analysis paper that I handed out, it's 2 pages. The scoring worksheet, so it's explaining if you got a 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. And then the 10 questions that are based upon the most missed. So 3 things that you need to turn in order to receive your 30-point credit. Okay, chapter 24. So chapter 24, it's pretty simple. We're going to go through reduce, reuse, recycle. So we're going to be able to kind of push through this. A lot of the stuff that we have talked about in the past, you'll hear about it again in this chapter. Some stuff you'll hear new. So the first picture in your textbook shows you some obsolete computers. These are computers in a warehouse in Texas, and they are not usable anymore. And so this is something that we're having to deal with now more than ever before. So it used to be that we were able to use e-waste or electronic waste for long periods of time, but now because technology is changing so quickly, we change out our computers every 18 to 24 months, not because they're broken, but just because there's new technology. So these computers are in a warehouse. They are waiting to be shipped off to other countries. Many times they're shipped off to Thailand and developing countries. And if you have functional tubes, meaning that they're not broken, they can be made into TVs, and they're basically recycled. The problem with a lot of this waste is that they contain heavy metals, so we don't want to just put it into a landfill. And also, a lot of the materials are minerals that are non-renewable, so we don't want to just take this and throw it to a landfill. We want to make sure that we're able to recycle some of these electronics. And and we're going to talk a little bit about hazardous waste at the end, and how to dispose of hazardous waste. So hazardous waste, which we'll talk more in depth, anything that could be hazardous to us, heavy metals like mercury, lead, so that has to go to a specific place, and here's the specific hazardous waste site for where our area, for Delray, Boca. Okay, so for solid waste, this makes perfect sense. We produce the most per capita solid waste of any country. So we have a lot of people. We talked about consumption overpopulation and people overpopulation, if you remember in chapter 1. So we consume so much stuff in the United States, which leads to a lot of waste. And so it's increasing. So this is 4.6 pounds per person per day. But that's on the rise. Hazardous or regular waste, not hazardous waste, has been a major problem. We've been dealing with this for the last 20 or 30 years. And to give you an example, there are many examples actually of us having to deal with waste. But one of them includes the Cayenne Sea barge. And so what happened basically with this barge, you can kind of see a picture of it in the bottom right-hand corner, is that this barge, which is a Bahamian ship, was hired by the city of Philadelphia to take ash. So it was ash from an incinerator, and to remove it from Philadelphia because there was no place to put it. And so the ash was loaded onto this barge. It was supposed to be dropped off in the Bahamas. As the barge entered the Bahamas, the Bahamian government said, you know what, we think there's toxic chemicals and materials, we don't want it. And so we simply have no place to put it because a lot of our landfills have been filled up. And so what happened with this barge, and you can kind of see from this picture, is that for years it was sent around the world. So in 1986 is when it left the city of Philadelphia. all the way up until 2000s, where the barge had gone from one country to another country trying to drop off this incinerator ash. Um, it eventually was found under a different name in Singapore, and there was no ash on the barge. So we think that they just dumped it into the Indian Ocean. But the point is that we have a lot of solid waste and ash, and we have no place to dispose of it. Alright, so you need to know the difference between the two types of solid waste. We have municipal solid waste, and we have non-municipal solid waste. Municipal solid waste, you'll see abbreviated MSW, and whenever you see the word municipal, it's referring to like office buildings, homes. And so here's the definition: solid material discarded by homes, office buildings, retail stores, schools, etc. You have a little 2% next to where it says municipal solid waste. This makes up only 2% of all of the solid waste that we discard. So relatively small portion of solid waste produced. So only 2% comes from our homes, the stuff that we are throwing out. And so I know it's hard to see this graph here, but it gives you the percentages of municipal solid waste. So relatively small portion of our solid waste. Non-municipal is going to make up 98%, which we're going to see in a second, of our municipal solid waste. So you can see that most of our solid waste is in the form of paper and paperboard. So 13% ends up being our paper and paperboard. Sorry, 32%. My percentages are really confusing. Plastic down here says 12.1%. You can put a little star by plastics or right next to plastic. It's the fastest growing municipal solid waste. So even though it's small compared to paper and paperboard, it's the fastest growing. We're using more and more plastic now than we've ever used before. Non-municipal solid waste, this is solid waste that's generated by mining, agriculture, and industry. So 98% of all of our solid waste is non-municipal. And of the 98%, 75% is from mining. So we have mining, agriculture is 13%, and industry is 10%. Sorry. So the majority of our solid waste that needs to be discarded each year is non-municipal solid waste, even though we're concerned with the amount of stuff that we're throwing out from our homes. So how do we dispose of our solid waste? Where do we put our solid waste? So there's four main ways in which we dispose of our solid waste. The first one's called an open dump. This is not what we do in highly developed countries. So this picture at the bottom right-hand corner is showing you an open dump. This is when you have a country or a city that just takes the solid waste and simply puts it on the ground. That's all they're doing. We've replaced these open dumps in highly developed countries with sanitary landfills. That's probably what you are familiar with, especially when you're riding on the road like the turnpike. Developing countries still have open dumps, so they simply don't have a place to put solid waste, so they end up just putting it onto the ground outside of the city. Problem with an open dump, you can imagine, you're going to have vermin, which are like rats. They can carry diseases. It's going to smell extremely bad. It can pollute the air. It can pollute the groundwater. It can run off into waterways. So open dumps are highly polluting, and it's illegal in the United States just to take your garbage and dump it on the ground. What we use are sanitary landfills. And so we're going to look at sanitary landfills on the next couple slides. But the majority of our solid waste ends up in a landfill. We can burn our garbage. So if we have a high volume of garbage and we're able to burn it, we will. Plastic, paper, and rubber are the best things to burn. So we'll look at that in a second as well. But plastic, paper and rubber are the best things to burn. They burn the easiest and produce a lot of heat that we could use to make energy. And the last of the 4 is composting. And obviously we just saw on channel 1 that looked like a little compost. That's really cool. But basically we can take organic scraps of food and we can old school compost, put it outside, add some fertilizer to it. It will heat up by itself, depending on how much there is. It could take anywhere between 6 months to a year, and then we can use that as a soil fertilizer or soil conditioner. So these are the 4 main ways, but the open dumps are illegal. We don't use that in highly developed countries, and we're going to go through the rest of the 3 because those are the ones that we use in the United States. You can see the percentages of solid waste. So just over 54%, just about 55% of our solid waste ends up in a landfill. We're actually recycling more and more, so 33.4%, and then we have about 12.6% that's going to go to incineration. Okay, so sanitary landfills, like I said, about 55% of our garbage in the United States ends up in a sanitary landfill. You have to understand that it's sanitary. It's different than an open dump. Again, an open dump, illegal, dumping trash on the floor, outside. Sanitary landfill is going to be sanitary. It's going to have a bunch of mechanisms to keep it cleaner. And a couple of things I'm going to point out here. A sanitary landfill is going to have a fence. So just to start with the fence. This is something that's going to surround the hole that we're putting the garbage. So it's going to surround the hole in which we're putting in the garbage each day to prevent any solid material from flying around and like leaving the landfill. The landfill, every single day after all of the garbage is put into the hole in which it's being compacted, it has to be covered with a layer of soil. So each day, at the end of the day, after all the garbage is filled into the landfill, it is covered with a layer of soil. And the purpose of that is to reduce the vermin and the smell from all of the garbage. If you look at the bottom part, it says that there's going to be a double layer of compacted clay and a high density plastic. So we're going to have a liner of clay, and plastic underneath the landfill. The purpose of this is to prevent any stuff, it's known as leachate, from making its way down into the ground and contaminating our groundwater. So it has a double layer of plastic and clay to prevent any leachate, that's like the liquid material, from making its way down into the groundwater. Along with that layer, we also have something called a leachate system. You can kind of see these pipes that have holes in them, or they're perforated. That is also going to collect any liquid that oozes down through the landfill, and all of that liquid is then going to be cleaned out, so it has to go to a treatment center, and then we're able to have purified water from that. So clean that out, get rid of all the contaminants. Something else you may see, there's like a long pole that's coming up. We also have a lot of methane that is produced within the landfill, so we need to remove that methane and burn it off, because there's anaerobic bacteria in the landfill that are breaking down organic waste, producing methane. Methane can be a fire hazard. So all of these are techniques to make a landfill sanitary, therefore making it cleaner than, say, an open dump. For the second part, it says may charge a tipping fee. Many landfills in the Midwestern part of the United States, they are going to accept trash and garbage from highly voluminous states, I would say. So like in New York, New Jersey, they'll send their trash to other states. And landfills will charge what's called a tipping fee. So it's just a fee for garbage from other states to come in, since there's not enough landfill space in some of those areas. Some problems with the landfills, even though we have all these techniques to keep it sanitary, many times landfills are not up to code. Landfills that were built a long time ago may not have that double layer of plastic and clay, and you can't just pick up all the garbage and remove it. So that's an issue. As we just said a second ago, methane gas is going to be produced by the anaerobic bacteria, which could be a fire hazard, could cause an explosion. Surface, water, and ground contamination, even though we have that double layer of plastic and clay, like I just said, as well as a leachate system, some older landfills may not have those things in order to keep the groundwater clean. So if they're older, they may not have that. Not a long-term remedy. There's not a whole bunch of sites left over for landfills. If you think back, there's that NIMBY attitude, that not my backyard. People don't want to live near landfills, but many of the good sites for landfills have been taken up. For a landfill, it needs to be far away from the public, but also close enough for transportation. And even when a landfill is closed down, it's still going to cost a decent amount of money. So landfills have to be monitored for 30 years after they close. And water still has to be treated from the landfill. Even though it's been closed and it's not used anymore for garbage, it still can be polluting the ground. So it has to be monitored. And so just to give you an example, this Fresh Kills landfill, it's in New York. It was the largest landfill in the United States. It closed in 2002, and they're making it into a park, which is pretty cool. But it's estimated that they're leaching about 1 million gallons of liquid down into the ground every single day. So it's leaching a lot of liquid down into the ground, and even though it's closed, it's still a problem. So in landfills, we have the special problem of plastic. Plastic is awesome because plastic is going to be durable. It doesn't break down. We use it for many products, so it's awesome because it's so durable. You can drop things on the ground and they're not going to break. But the same reason why we love plastic is also the reason why it's bad for a landfill. So the amount of plastic is increasing. Like I said, this is the fastest growing municipal solid waste. Bottled water is the fastest growing beverage worldwide. So we have plastic in basically everything that we do. It doesn't break down easily, so it persists and lasts for long periods of time. And scientists have come up with photodegradable and biodegradable plastics, but they haven't been proven to break down in a landfill quite yet. Photodegradable means that it's going to be broken down by the sunlight. That's obviously not helpful in a landfill. And biodegradable means that it should be broken down by bacteria, but it's very difficult to mimic the conditions in the landfill to see if bacteria are actually able to break it down. But plastics are made up of a bunch of polymers. You can see some examples of plastics in our environment and things that we buy. Plastic bags, maybe you've heard that in California and some states they're starting to ban plastic bags, so you have to bring reusable bags if you want to go to for the supermarket. We have plastics that are building up in our oceans. So plastic is a major problem when it comes to the environment and landfills. Tires. Tires are also a major problem. They are made from materials. Many times the tire is made from something called vulcanized rubber that cannot be recycled. You cannot use that to make a new tire. So basically we have the buildup of all these tires. This is a picture in California. You can see there's a gentleman standing in the middle of the tires. He's wearing a red shirt. And all of these tires are going to be burned. So they're at an incinerator. And 45% of the tires are burned. But they're really not allowed to be put in landfills. Many states ban them. The reason why is because they're really large. They take up a lot of space. They hold water well. So when they hold water, it's a breeding ground for mosquitoes. They're very light and they move upward through the garbage. And as we just said a second ago, methane is produced in a landfill. And that is highly flammable, and so are the tires. So they can also be a fire hazard. So the best thing that we can do with our landfills is either shred them, our tires is to shred them and put them into a landfill, or we can burn them. We can also recycle our tires into other things other than tires, so you can have some patio furniture, I guess. I don't know, some cool decorative, I don't know what that is. Chairs. necklaces. I don't know. So you can be creative, but for the most part, they can't be reused into tires. And tire fires are really harmful. So this is from The Simpsons. There's a really bad tire fire. The smoke is very black and thick. So if it were to catch on fire in a landfill, it would be a major problem to deal with. Very difficult to put out a tire fire. And incineration. So number 3, basically burning our solid waste. Couple positives. So if we have garbage that can be burned, we would like to burn it, as we just said with tires. The positive here is that when you have a large amount of waste, it can reduce the volume by 90%. So instead of having this large amounts of garbage, like what we have in a landfill, we can burn it and we just end up with ash, and then we have to dispose of the ash, usually in a hazardous landfill. And the heat, if we have a waste energy incinerator, can be used for electricity or to warm buildings. So we can actually use that heat for energy since we're burning it. And you can see here the graph, it's showing you carbon dioxide for waste compared to natural gas, oil, and coal. And burning our waste, we're going to release less CO2. So if we're going to have to produce heat, changing water to steam to turn a turbine to produce electricity. So if we're producing electricity, we might as well just burn our garbage. Some of the problems associated with this, obviously you should think air pollution. That's like the #1 issue with burning garbage. So whatever's in that garbage is going to enter the atmosphere, and it's going to be expensive to use air pollution control devices. And not everything can be burned. So we don't want to burn glass. Things have to be separated. We don't want to burn glass. If we try and burn glass, it melts on the inside of the incinerator, making it difficult to remove. We don't want to burn food. Food has high amounts of water in it, so it doesn't burn well. And we don't want to burn anything with heavy metals like batteries. All that stuff has to be removed. As I mentioned a second ago, the best things to burn would be paper, plastic, and rubber. Those are the best things that we can burn. They're going to produce a lot of heat, but they're still going to produce air pollution. And so if you look at this table, it gives you the air emissions, pounds per megawatt hour, for our municipal solid waste, MSW, municipal solid waste. Again, we're producing less of these air pollutants by burning municipal waste than we are by burning coal, oil, and natural gas. So less air pollutants overall. Your book talks about certain types of incinerators. The main one that you should be aware of is something called a mass burn incinerator. It's a large incinerator that also recovers that heat to produce energy or to produce electricity. You can see from this truck here that it's going to dump all of the waste into a bunker. We're going to have a crane that's going to pick up that waste, put it into an incinerator or a furnace. We're going to end up with this ash that needs to be put into a hazardous landfill, which we'll talk about at the end of the chapter. And then we're going to have some air pollution control devices along the way. We have a scrubber as an example, electrostatic precipitator. We remove the pollutants, and we're able to produce electricity. So that's just the example of the mass burn incinerator. And the last slide for today is how to deal with problems of incineration. So as I said a second ago, there's always going to be some air pollution. And so air pollution control devices are necessary, which are expensive. Produces a large amount of ash. So we have 2 types of ash, bottom ash and fly ash. Many times they have to go to a hazardous landfill. So it's a type of landfill that's different than just a sanitary landfill. Basically, the ash is going to be put into containers and then buried into the ground versus being put directly into the ground. Site selection is controversial. Again, you have that NIMBY attitude. So if you have an incinerator near your house, you're probably not going to be very happy because they're burning garbage. So you can see the bottom left-hand corner that's showing you saying no to incineration. It can be harmful to your health if there's no air pollution control devices. It's going to cost more in taxes, it says. It's going to decrease property values because your house is near an incinerator and people don't probably want to live there, or it's hard to resell. And air pollution control devices are expensive. and we'll start with composting tomorrow.